No.
Sorry, not to give you a hard time or anything.
No,
I thought about it.
I agree with it, and I say, hey, I would like to go and train to be a real midwife and learn from Ina May Gaskin, which, by the way, she is a non-licensed person. She's received many honorary degrees, but she is not a licensed midwife.
We might want to talk to her someday.
Yeah, she would.
Honorarium degrees?
Yeah, she's spoken at many graduation ceremonies, and so they usually will, if the person doesn't, I think she has her degree maybe in English, something like that. I think and she certainly is a superb author, but she does not she didn't earn it the way I did it. She didn't go through the program. That's right.
I find that interesting. I have to wonder, do they give these degrees also to be able to say, oh yeah, she's got a degree. We gave it to her. She earned it because of her experience, but this way they can say it all still falls under our envelope.
It's possible, but it's interesting.
Just a thought. Nothing that she obviously asked for, but
I don't know. And also, it's very confusing to folks because you go and maybe what you've also discussed in your other interviews, you go from state to state, and they're different.
Yep.
Regulations. Certainly for our profession, that's true. If we just look to our neighbors to the south, midwives in that state, in Pennsylvania, only just recently got the approval to prescribe medications. Not like that's a real banner thing, really, but that's all pieced together with, are you an autonomous provider or not? They still have to have written practice agreements. We do not in this state as a licensed person. So there's all these variances from state to state. The certified professional midwife, who is seen in many states, I think, is it up to 25 now? Either 15 or 25. Sorry, can't remember exactly. We'll have to fact check it. That a CPM can practice legally and is licensed as I am, but in all the rest of the states in the nation, a CPM is not. She's considered a lay midwife. Even though there is a definite program that a CPM attends, she's able to pass the boards, sit for a board exam, same as I did. Not all states are going to acknowledge that, just like not all states are going to acknowledge naturopaths. The same kind of reasons we're talking about.
Does New York recognize naturopath?
They do not. They do not.
Here's a question. Is naturopath interchangeable with kinesiology?
They're two different studies.
Okay.
Yeah. Think of a naturopath as the same as an MD, except a naturopath is, so diagnostic-wise, they've taken anatomy, physiology, they've done all of that background work to be able to diagnose, but they choose to treat very differently. Their modality of treatment is completely different, and their emphasis is on health promotion.
Right. Both of those are on the idea is to let the body do the work.
That's right.
So you're figuring out, what do we need to do? Why isn't as Lori said, why isn't your body fighting disease? I think is the approach that they take, right? Okay.
That's a good way of putting it.
Sorry, just a side question.
That's good.
So with I guess with the strict guidelines that you have to follow being licensed, in regards to the birth certificate, you have to fill that out.
I'm required to. Yes, that's part of my duty as a licensed person.
Now, what happens if you fill it out and I don't sign it, and my wife doesn't sign it, or I tear it up in front of you? Well, I would never do that to you, but
I wouldn't do anything to report it, but technically that is what our duty is supposed to be. So they want all those births on record.
Well, they can have it on record in the county office. They just aren't going to, because it is law. They do have to have it on record, I know that. But it is not law. The birth has to report it to the county.
It's a pretty vague topic to find information on, and we're avidly trying to study that more and more and more as we learn more.
It's a very interesting link, yeah.
And I'm sure that'll start to eat at you as if you find more out about that, with what you do. But are there any other things that potentially or already do bother you that you have to do?
Well, technically, this vaccine issue that I brought up, I am no longer a member of American College of Nurse Midwives. I chose not to re-enroll this year because of their agenda, and it was at the end of March. They sent out a notification with our usual newsletter that they had partnered with Centers for Disease Control, CDC, another organization whose job it is to be the sort of the intermediary between government and all of the county and local health department folks, And what is the mission? It is to push vaccinology, is to push the vaccines. And in the body of the letter, because they shared it with us in the link, it said that pregnant women had been included in these vaccine trials for decades, and that's just not true. Anybody who has any access to that information knows it's not true. They've been specifically left out because for as long as I can remember, and even before then, probably since the beginning of vaccines, it was determined that you didn't want to place that potential risk for the baby. The baby receives all substances as a direct pipeline through that placenta. There is no buffering. There is no protection to the blood-brain barrier. And as you know, we could get into more depth about how the vaccines work and how whether the GMOs, how do they really work at that. There's that's been broken down at that point, and it begins, you know, to be less and less of a protection. So in any event, that's one big bone of contention for me. So I wrote them a letter and said, I can no longer be a member of this organization. I contest this. And what are the ones that they're looking to promote? Well, the flu vaccine that they've already been trying to promote. Even again, they're saying that it's safe and that it's been tested. That's not true. They're willing to promote it anyways, and they want the Tdap to be done by the end of the third trimester because of this epidemic proportion that they're citing.
Yeah,
and they want us to help promote folks to be participating in the upcoming HIV vaccine trials, which Merck, their latest prototype HIV vaccine.
They're actually going to.
They want to include pregnant women in the HIV vaccine trial.
My response to when you said that it's been part of these trials for years, my response would be, what trials? Well, they're actually going to conduct trials?
They're going to conduct trials. And where did they start the HIV one? Recently, the Merck prototype was just demoed in Africa. And what did they find? They found that it increased AIDS by 70%. It was a big fail. But they want whatever they come up with as a prototype, whatever they end up introducing to the American public, they want to include pregnant women. And then I don't agree. First of all, I don't think anybody should be getting that one.
There's a risk with passing it on to the child.
Why would they even... Why? It doesn't make sense to me. Why? Why would you take the risk?
What do you mean it doesn't make sense?
No, it does. Why would you take the risk if you've had this kind of fall in Africa?
Yeah.
Why would you take the risk of pushing the same vaccine with actual women who can give actual testimony here in the U.S.? I mean, it's one thing in Africa. We don't hear about that. ABC News knows nothing.
Can buffer it, yeah.
But then again, I mean, you know, you look at the the abortion issue, and you get 30, you know. Now I think the organization, National Organization for Women's Rights, show up. You know, it's her body, and you'll have news coverage. But you can have tens of thousands of people march on D.C. every year, and there's no coverage.
It's true.
So I don't know. Maybe, I guess I can understand why. So they can say that they have it, but it just I'm thinking like.
Well, Merck has a really long and shadowy, dirty history. They've been. Even the Food and Drug Administration, that's by no means an ethical group, has dinged them, and you know they've paid billions of dollars for every time that they've had these mishaps, and certainly it'll be interesting to see what happens with the Gardasil vaccine, and if enough voices are raised, are they going to need to promote some action on that?
Is the Gardasil vaccine the HIV?
The Gardasil is the HPV, but Merck is the company that produces the Gardasil vaccine, but it's also the one that has this prototype that was involved in the trial in Africa. Yeah, so they definitely they've performed badly over the last several decades, and they can a couple of billion here and there certainly doesn't hurt them any. They can still roll along with their shares. And and that's not even to say that folks can, when they can't bring lawsuit, you know that, right? That since 1984 in this country, that's been abolished. When parents know and realize, they go through the VAERS reporting, and they talk to their pediatrician, who may or may not report it correctly when there's been a reaction, but it's very few of them that are going to get any kind of compensation, and it's only if they go through all the hoops to present their case at the vaccine court, and not nearly enough cases get heard.
Well, and with a corporation at large, they will never let you get that far.
That's right.
They're going to show up and say, Here's $5 million. Don't ever talk about it again. Sign this waiver.
Right.
And I mean, who in their right mind is going to go $5-10 million? I mean, a company like that throws around billions.
Nothing.
You could throw around more money than that. Who in their right mind is going to go, man, I could pay for my child's rest of medical expenses and everything that I have for the rest of my life with that money.
Yeah.
You know, now ethically, you should stand your ground and say, no, we're going to court. But I mean, if we're honest, that's tempting. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
so I can see why people don't. You know.
Have you ever you remember the band Nirvana?
Mm-hmm.
You remember the album Nevermind? Are you familiar with the
I don't
album
remember
cover?
that one.
I just keep thinking about that image as you guys are talking. I'm gonna grab it and just show you it real quick.
Oh, yes, I remember that one.
You remember this one?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just really interesting.
Yeah.
You know, with talking about this.
Never mind.
For our listeners, I'm holding up the vinyl release of Nirvana's 1991 album Nevermind. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of this album. It definitely is good in the sense that it destroyed hair metal. Maybe not good in the sense that Kurt Cobain was probably an ardent follower of the occult.
But very symbolic cover.
If you haven't seen it, you should Google it.
But yeah, you talk about dangling the money in front of us from birth, and
from cradle.
you talk about the birth certificate and whatever you want to talk about. I mean, it is quite a power.
The ironic part of this photo is that this child gives that value.
Oh yeah, I know.
Well, and there's all the symbolism that's on the dollar bill too.
Well,
the hidden.
And the album was originally entitled Sheep.
Oh,
And then he changed
they
it.
totally were.
Never mind.
And then he changed it to Never Mind, You'll Never Get It. You know what I mean?
That's pretty ironic.
Wow.
Anyway.
Well, it's because we're all drinking the fluoride.
That's true.
Yeah.
And he's probably swimming in fluoridated water.
Well, it's definitely chlorinated, I'm sure.
Chlorinated,
sure.
yeah.
It's too clean.
I think we might be digressing now.
I think so. But what is nirvana if not to digress?
Yeah.
And what is the definition of the name or the word nirvana?
Isn't that a higher self? What religion does that go to? Buddhist
or Hinduism. I'm not sure which.
I'm not sure either.
Hinduism,
but it's like this higher self or highest point that you can reach of your inner self. Or
epitome.
So anyway, I'll turn that over so we don't look at that anymore. Anyway, at this point in the conversations, since I think I've pretty much disrupted the flow of all that we've talked about, I kind of like to talk more about, again, what you do, and just for the moms out there and the dads out there, because Daniel and I have been through the whole birth situation, and Daniel hasn't taken on the home birth approach yet.
We will be.
Yes. And this last winter, a few months ago, my wife and I did opt to do a home birth with a birthing tub, and it was quite a success and much better than using the midwifery that we used before. Doing it at the hospital, having those constant visits every half hour, or maybe even sooner. It's like you can just not get any rest, and that's a heck of a day, man, for her and you. I mean, you're trying to support your wife as much as you can, holding her up during her surges, or her, what do you call them?
Surges.
I mean, we call them surges, but what's the real term?
Contractions. Yeah.
During her contractions,
That's just a note on the hospitals, how often they come in. You can't sleep with the baby on you. They come in every half hour, on the dot.
It's horrible.
On the dot. No sleep, lady. Your baby needs to go to the
nursery.
The nursery. No, it doesn't. Oh.
It's yeah. Anyway.